Past 8.
Cyclone Gita is expected to move southeast across the upper South Island and lower North Island late on Tuesday and Wednesday, bringing some pretty heavy rain and gales. Let's talk now to Chris Brandolino. He is Niwa's principal forecasting scientist and has been good enough to come into the studio this morning. Good morning, Chris.
Morena, good morning.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks
good
for
to
having
actually
me.
see you. We talked to you on the phone a bit, so it's good to see you in person and very nicely done up in a suit and tie.
Well, thank you.
The impact of this is going to be pretty significant, potentially, for the upper South Island and for the lower North Island and even up into the central North Island, eh?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the main impacts are three of them, two dealing with water. So we have wind, we have rainfall, and we have waves. Not necessarily in that order, but those are the three big impacts. So along and north of the center of Gita, where you see that swirling mass and where the lowest air pressure is, that's the center. That's where the strongest winds are going to be, generally speaking. And that means basically, so if the center were to come on shore, if you will, ex-tropical Cyclone Gita, early Wednesday morning, it looks like areas from, say, Farewell Spit, maybe Motueka, Buller, Nelson will be on that just northern edge. And farther north, winds will be strong and gusty. Wellington, there'll be some heavy rain in Wellington. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And all the way to about Taranaki. North of the Bombays, there's not going to be much impact. Yeah, a little breezy, maybe a few showers. Now, to the south of the center, so we're going areas from the aforementioned Buller down toward Westport, maybe over toward Kaikoura and down toward Christchurch. That's where there'll be some significant rainfall as well. So basically, where is that sweet spot? Poor choice of words, I suppose, where the rain and the wind are going to be most intense, and it's probably going to be in the far northern end of the South Island, maybe getting to the far southern parts of the North Island, depending exactly where that center comes ashore.
And is that Wednesday you're looking at?
Yeah, actually tomorrow. So tomorrow is when the weather starts going downhill, and things pretty much are really high intensity. They kind of the weather will be a bit of a crescendo, but pretty quickly things will ramp up. And then Tuesday night into very early Wednesday morning, that's when things may tend to peak. And then things taper off, at least on the west coast, and rain may increase on the east coast of the South Island.
Okay,
thereafter.
so you're saying it might be a pretty interesting commute in Wellington tomorrow.
Yeah, well, it's all about timing, location, kind of like real estate in a business. So it looks like heavy rain is going to fall in the metropolitan Wellington area very late tonight, but especially very early on Tuesday morning. And that means the rain will potentially have a high impact around the morning rush hour, which is bad timing. So we could be talking potentially, poor drainage, flooding, and people trying to get into work when there's heavy rainfall either occurring or maybe that just had occurred. So between the hours of 3 a.m. and 9 a.m., there could be some pretty heavy rainfall in the Wellington area for tomorrow.
And I guess check your ferry sailings, because it sounds like from where you're positioning this thing, the Cook Strait might be a pretty interesting place to be.
Yeah, there's going to be some big waves that come. I mean, wind makes waves, simple as that. And this thing's been spinning around for, seems like forever.
Well, I was going to say, it's quite a beast, isn't it? I mean, you would have thought that it would have normally blown itself out by the time it got here.
Well, the conditions for tropical cyclones, you need warm water, and the atmosphere's got to be favorable. I won't get into the nerd stuff. But we had those existing for quite a while, and that's why it briefly did reach Category 5, the top of the scale last week. As it approached Fiji, never quite got there, which is good news for them. Then it made that curve south, moving over cooler waters. It's losing its energy, still technically a Category 2 last check tropical cyclone. But as it moves farther south, even though the Tasman Sea is unusually warm, it's not quite warm enough to sustain a tropical cyclone. So it loses some of that giddy up, that but it still has quite a bit of wind and rain with it.
Yeah, just quick final point, because we were talking to the West Coast authorities earlier on the program. They were saying maybe sort of 5 o'clock tonight they'd get a better fix on whether they might even need to, call a state of emergency. What can you tell us in terms of whether we're going to have a really clear idea by then?
I think as the day unfolds, Niwa has high resolution modeling, which is able to kind of more precisely see where the heaviest rain will fall and the strongest winds will be. I'm going to head back to the office and have a look at the latest model data, which will be available around 9:30, and have a look. So I think that sounds about right. As the day unfolds, we'll look at more information. But some of these areas that had Fahey rainfall will get the rainfall from this system, and because it is a quick mover, Good news that it's leaving, but bad news, a lot of that rain falls at once. So we got to watch the flooding threat, widespread 100 millimeter plus across the lower north and the upper South Island, some localized 200 millimeters plus rainfall. And we have the wind gusts in some areas, more than 120 clicks. That'll cause some damage. So today's the day to basically get prepared, get that emergency kit, tie down loose items, bring them inside, clear the gutters, clear the storm drains, get that done now so you can try to minimize any potential impact and, of course, follow the advice of your local emergency management officials.
Good advice. Thank you very much, Chris.
Pleasure seeing you.
Your time, and thanks again for coming into the studio. Chris Brandolino there from Niwa, 20 minutes past 8.
Well, Civil Defence is warning people to prepare for power cuts, road closures and possible evacuation as Cyclone Gita approaches. Director of Civil Defence is Sarah Stuart-Black. She's in the Wellington studio. Good morning.
Good morning.
What areas of the country are you most worried about?
Well, I think we've heard from Chris that the lower part of the North Island, the top of the South and some of that west coast of the South Island are most at risk at this stage based on their forecasting.
Okay, so Wellington, Nelson, maybe Buller, some of these areas that have already been hit quite hard by Cyclone Fahey just a couple of weeks ago, do you think a state of emergency is likely to be on the cards?
It's unclear at this stage. I think what we know is that if the forecast high winds, high rainfall, which could create more storm surge, it could affect already vulnerable parts of the coastline or areas that have already been affected. So I think the West Coast will be best placed to make a decision about whether they may need to evacuate households and families, and they'll be wanting to understand what those likely impacts will be, particularly if it's likely to happen during the night.
Indeed, it does sound like it is going to hit during the night, in which case are you recommending that all people who live near the sea in low-lying areas in Wellington, Nelson, West Coast, maybe even up north as far as Taranaki, should they be prepared to have to go?
I think there's a real need here to be prepared for the way this might play out. So that's about having a discussion within your home, whether that's family or flatmates, whatever your home situation, about what you'll do if you do need to evacuate, or if the power goes out, or if the water is not on, and making sure that you've got a grab bag if you need to go quickly, remembering to take your pets with you.
Okay, so are you anticipating large-scale evacuations being necessary? Not
necessarily at this stage. I think that we'll be looking to Niwa and the Met Service to provide us with the latest information, and it's about people within their communities keeping in touch via radio and obviously online means as well, about where's safe to be. At this point, it's about making sure that their outdoor furniture and rubbish bins and trampolines have all been secured, and then during the storm keeping doors and windows closed with the curtains closed as well, which will help protect if any glass breaks, but also being prepared to move if the situation changes.
What about evacuation centres? Have you stood up the sort of places that you're going to require potentially?
So across the country we have civil defence emergency management groups. They're made up from local government and emergency services, and they'll be undertaking those plans right now. A lot of work's been done over the weekend and actually since Thursday in terms of pre-planning to make sure that if there was a need to provide those sort of facilities that they could be activated quickly.
We'll find out. Thank you very much. That's Sarah Stuart-Black. She's Director of Civil Defence on Morning Report at 23 minutes past 8 now. And some traffic news confirming the traffic news we had a little bit earlier on, that the Swan on State Highway 1 in Auckland was indeed ushered safely to the side of the road by police. There was some confusion.
Was it a black swan or a white swan?
I don't know. I just know that it's a swan. What colour are swans normally?
This is the
thing. You get both, don't you?
It's a black swan event.